Welcome back, everybody. Before we dive into the introduction, I just want to point you to Slido. I'll remind you again at the end of my introduction, but we will be using it to gather some answers to the word cloud. So you can open that at slido.com and use the password GLF Bonn 2020. Well, thank you all for coming back to this second session in our afternoon. In this session, we'll be diving deeper into what makes a good alliance and how can we scale these lessons to a landscape level. Current disconnected efforts to support sustainable landscapes feel far short of the effectiveness and scale needed to achieve important global targets such as the UN Sustainability Goals or the Paris Climate Accord. To shift from degradation to regeneration requires a new approach to supporting integrated management of landscapes. Many have recognized the need for this shift, and hundreds of integrated landscape management partnerships with farmer organizations, NGOs, local governments, and businesses are forging new holistic strategies to meet resource and development challenges. Yet they have difficulty accessing financial, markets, and policy support for their own visions of sustainable development. We as the Rainforest Alliance are working in radical collaboration with dozens of organizations to catalyze system changes that enable landscape-scale partnerships to make much more quickly and effectively achieve their regenerative landscape and livelihood ambitions. We aim to accelerate action and impact across thousands of landscapes, benefiting 1 billion people by 2030, by providing the tools, support, and connections they need. Through this 1 million landscapes for a billion people project, we are working in partnership with eco-agriculture partners, Common Land, Conservation International, Landscape Finance Lab, Tech Matters, UNDP, and dozens of design and local landscape partners to help catalyze this new partnership. In this session, we're pleased to be joined by partners from projects that have been working in landscapes that have shown critical steps towards regeneration and protection, and who make up part of the 1,000 landscapes we look to bring together. Leading us through this session, we're pleased to welcome Daniel Zimmer from Climate Kick. Director of Sustainable Land Use, Daniel has developed and supervised the implementation of Climate Kick's portfolio of innovation projects, aiming to accelerate the transition to a low carbon and climate resilient economy and society. He is also an expert in climate and water issues, spanning from engineering to geopolitics. And just before I hand this over to Daniel, I'd like to go back to the Slido to remind you, we'd like to ask you all what an alliance means to you. So if you haven't already, you can sign in by going to slido.com, use the password GLF Bonn 2020, and click on the Rainforest Alliance session where you can add your answer throughout the session. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to Daniel to introduce the rest of our panel.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you all. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be moderating this session this afternoon. We Climate Kick are also involved in landscape programs. We have been supporting, for instance, the Landscape Finance Lab for several years. And we are also engaging with the partners mentioned by Emma in the 1,000 Landscape program. So in this session, we will be dealing with the importance of building strong alliances to scale landscape programs. And I will now briefly introduce our speakers in this session. So we have 4 of them. So we have Ileana Monterosso, scientist at the Center for International Forestry Research, who coordinates gender and social inclusion research. She has experience in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and she has been working for 20 years in the Mayan Biosphere Reserve. She's also working with the World Agroforestry Center. We then have Ahmed Aziz, who is a Senior Program Officer at Partnership for Forests. He provides strategic portfolio development directions to that program, and is working specifically on cocoa, palm oil, timber, and he's also a catalyzer for investments in landscapes. We have also our third speaker, Kennedy Ntoso, is the head of the Olam Ghana Sustainable Portfolio. He has extensive experience on cocoa, on landscape programs, and is particularly in charge of developing the Olam flagship sustainability program. Finally, we have Bruno, who is the regional director for the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, for Latin America. So Bruno has also a large experience on forests, agriculture, finance, and on social development. He has a financial background. So with these four speakers, we will have a conversation about the importance of the strong alliances, and I would like to introduce the conversation by a challenging questions that relates to the requirement to scale these landscape programs. So we know that especially after the crisis, the pandemic crisis that we are living, we will have opportunities to construct new programs, to build also on the experience of this global and dramatic experience. But there has been so far quite a number of experiences in landscapes, and some of them are already 30 years old, such as the concession program in Guatemala. So my question to all panelists to start this conversation is, so what did we learn and really we will be quick, I will try to keep it short, this session, but in a few words, what is missing today? What is necessary if we want to scale now in the coming years the landscape programs, and where do we see opportunities given the current situation? So maybe I will start in the same order as my presentation. Ileana, could you briefly give us your views on this?
Thank you, Daniel. Hello to everybody. Well, I think it's really simple. What do we need to scale this experience? I think it starts with rights. We need rights to be recognized, and I think actually that is what explains why we don't see these type of models in other regions of the world. For instance, when we know that 65% of the land globally, it's being managed under some sort of customary tenure arrangement, but in practice, only 20% of these are being recognized. So I think rights, it's the entry point for this to happen and scale up. Over back to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much for this concise answer. Ahmed Aziz, given your experience in the forest partnership for forests, what would be your take on this?
Right. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this question, Zima. So from our perspective, if you really look at over the past decades, you would actually realize that individual companies or entities have been working, in silos. And therefore, in terms of the impact that they are able to deliver on their projects, it's actually very limited. So therefore, from the perspective of partnerships for forests, we actually see, now as a very strong opportunity to actually build partnerships, build alliances, and then build consortiums whereby we can be able to leverage on each other's resources and leverage on each other's expertise to actually bring about collective action at scale. And really, this is exactly how Partnerships for Forests has positioned itself in the industry in West and Central Africa, and also in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, and in East Africa, working with partners such as Olam, Rainforest Alliance, and other private companies. So it's really about building partnerships and moving away from, the business as usual scenario of working in silos.
Thank you, Ahmed. Kennedy, what are your views, and how is the current situation an opportunity to scale? You are muted.
Sorry. Yeah.
Now we hear you now.
You can hear me now. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so basically, Olam cocoa experience with landscape projects in West Africa started with Rainforest Alliance some years ago in the Joabusubia landscape, and I remember very well the landscape where private sector was directly involved and supporting conservation and developing in an integrated way. Since then, our goal has been to transform and ability of landscape and partnerships to accelerate and scale up integrated landscape management approaches across West Africa. Now, currently, if you look at the COVID pandemic, it has really reminded the world to face common threats and must act immediately to find common global solutions by resetting priorities and channel resources accordingly. So the danger is that, to a large extent, stakeholders quickly lose the agency for collective action gained from COVID crisis and allow other things like poverty and forest degradation to fade into background. But essentially, for us in Olam, why hasn't it happened before? We want to say that it's centered on trust and integrity in our supply chain. Who is supposed to take leadership positions? Who leads this whole enterprise? And how that who is able to coordinate these activities in a better way? And we always used to see it as a government challenge. Now in Ghana, CFI has shown us the opportunity that it's possible to collaborate and work together on a landscape based approach. So for us, we think that we need some level of integrity, we need some level of trust. Instead of people working in silos, as Aziz said, we need to come together. And of course, COVID has shown us that, yes, coming together is the surest way to approach a sustainable production. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kennedy. Bruno, what is your view also on the situation and the scaling issue?
I think that, again, as Ileana said, it's very simple. From my perspective, it is just 4 ingredients: people, 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 and people. And let me go a little bit further than that. Trust, and what is given trust? Rights. Also leadership, to try to gather with other people, collaborate, and create partnerships. Risk takers, and this is to learn us and force ourselves to do things in a new way, out of our comfort zone, and believe that we can do things in a different way and that we can improve and drive change. So again, all these factors are within us, within people, and for me, the solution is people.
Thank you. So I take already quite a number of interesting keywords that resonate a lot with what we are doing in Climate Kick. I will just summarize what I heard: rights, silos, building trust, really people-based, and managing risks also are very important issues that we'll come back through these issues in the next session, or in the next phase of our session. And to go on with this session, so we will now go deeper into your own experiences, mostly so in Ghana and in Guatemala, because 2 of you, Ileana and Bruno, are mostly working in Guatemala in this session, while Ahmed and Kennedy, also for the audience to understand, Ahmed and Kennedy are more involved in Ghana, and so it's important already for the audience to understand this. So we'll start with Kennedy. Kennedy, you know very well the situation of cocoa in Ghana and probably Ivory Coast as well. And you know that while deforestation is combated now for a number of years, there is still growing demand, and farm expansion continues, sometimes due probably also to immigrants. It's a very complex problem of the farm expansion in this country. So could you, from your experience, tell us what has been the experience, how you try to address these issues in Ghana? And also, how do you see the role of a private company like Olam in this work? And related to this, of course, is what type of alliances do you think these companies need to build with the local stakeholders or any other state also, or maybe company, for instance?
Okay, so as you are very much aware, we had a very successful project with Rainforest Alliance, a landscape project in the Dwaboso Bia landscape. Olam concluded that it was a lot of work needs to be done, and the challenge of finding solutions to deforestation, poor returns for farmers, climate change threatening the supply chain of cocoa, and disempowerment of communities can better be integrated in a landscape effort in a collective action guided by SDGs, which I'm sure that we all, Olam and other well-meaning companies all subscribe to. So essentially, Olam has supported a P4F project or program as a pioneer program in the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, which takes a landscape and a collective action approach to solving systemic issues in cocoa and forest sectors. And largely, these systemic issues have to do with livelihood, deforestation, poor agricultural practices, and child labor, and so on. So these are issues which have developed our cocoa sector that needs a collective approach to solution. So Olam and P4F sort of discussed and aligned our key areas, and we sought the support of Rainforest Alliance to lead in terms of supporting farmer activities and ensuring that there's a community approach to forest conservation and protection. So basically, in the P4F landscape, we are seeking one main goal, which is the cocoa forest landscape in the corridor around the Sui River. Sui River is one of the, is the forest around the Sefioso area, one key cocoa area. The Suhuma, Tano Ihuru, and so on. All these reserves have been so endangered. So essentially, the P4F project seeks to ensure that we, first of all, improve and conserve these forests, sustain agricultural livelihoods of these communities, and also promote improved landscape governance by creating two landscapes, which Aziz would be talking about, to provide participatory forest landscape governance approach, especially monitor and control surrounding forest reserves. We have one of the largest deforestation percentages in the world, and we needed to ensure that projects like this would support communities to more or less be part of the forest management and conservation. Previously, it has been government leading, and government leading most of these projects at cut off communities. And once the communities see that they are not part of the main protection and conservation activities, then they don't take part in it, whatever happens to it. And it is very much important that we refocus and realign and involve communities to ensure that there is success. Now, the other part, as a private partner, Olam, as you are aware, is a global supply chain leader. And we dare to say that we are forward-looking and sustainable, you know. So our core purpose for doing our business is reimagining global agriculture and food systems, growing responsibly. And this includes, this means that we are aiming to put more back into the global forest food system that is taken out and deliver positive impact for both people and planet. So like Bruno was talking about, it's very much important that we look at all this and align ourselves accordingly. Before I end, we need to understand that for Olam, our Cocoa Compass ambition sets challenging goals for our direct cocoa supply chain. By 2030, we are working to achieve a living income for farmers, eliminate child labor, and increase tree carbon stock. We recognize that we cannot achieve this alone and must take a multi-stakeholder approach if we are to have positive impact at scale. Our position in the supply chain means we can help bring these different stakeholders together from the communities on the ground who play such an important role in creating change, as well as partners, such as, of course, we've worked with Rainforest Alliance for a long time, and of course, with P4F projects as well, and other partners. Finally, that is why we develop our sustainability sourcing platform. We set up the outsource platform. Not only does it help Olam refine our sustainability interventions, it provides our customers with detailed environmental and social data for unprecedented level of transparency at each stage of the supply chain journey so that we can help shape real change on the ground. So basically, in short, what we are saying is that we need to build partnership. We want to come together with others and then push this agenda of landscape and ensuring that farmers and our communities benefit from it. Thank you very much. I hope I've not been talking for too long.
Kennedy, I have a quick question in addition. So what has been, could you tell us a bit the impacts that your program, the tangible impacts that you have seen on the ground?
Yes, so with Rainforest Alliance and other partners, we have come to the conclusion that initially most farmers were practicing what we call a traditional farming methods, slash and burn. The main focus of the farmer was to just horizontal expansion. Let's keep on adding more farms. Let's keep on cutting more areas and make new farms. Now, the approach had been, let's intensify the little that we have so that there's no need to make new farms. So essentially, our impact has been in the area of farmers practicing intensification rather than geographical expansion and then therefore moving into new forest. We've also seen climate smart agriculture being practiced by farmers. We have seen, we have empowered our women to have additional sources of income. You are very much aware of our grass cutter, tie and dye, batik, soap making projects that has really supported women in our communities not to even venture into forest, to cut down forest and go into forest to harvest. We can domesticate some of these animals that we find in the wild and then make use of them at home and also sell for income and then for their nutrition as well. Essentially, we have also seen farmers adopting more pragmatic approach. We have supported farmers to look at farming as a business, as an entity, as an enterprise. so that over-reliance on just government freebies from government and other sources, farmers are able to now think that, look, I need to invest in my farm, what we call money in, money out. So you invest and then you make, you get your investment back in terms of returns. And last but not the least, we've seen an upset of agroforestry, applications where farmers want to integrate desirable trees in their ecosystems. And this has really helped farmers to have sustainable production over the period. There are quite a lot, and impact has been really good.
Good. So you are a good promoter of these landscapes approaches. Thank you. We'll come back probably with some other recommendations from you later. Bruno, we move now to Guatemala, where the community forestry concessions have been provided very good examples on these local partnerships in the Maya Biosphere Reserve, where you have been working. Apparently, these concessions are a good tool to manage deforestation and at the same time, or to control deforestation and provide to the smallholders a living income. So how do you think we could replicate the model? And can you explain just in a few words what it is about and how this model, in your view, could be replicated, and what also would be the barriers for its replication?
Yes, thank you. So the Guatemala and the Biosphere Reserve in Guatemala is more or less 500,000 hectares of tropical forests in Central America. And more or less 30 years ago, many organizations create a partnership to add and protect those forests. Rainforest Alliance, USA, Ford Foundation, ECO, the European Union, FSC International, and many others participate in the creation of and the government, of course, and the communities, local communities participate in the creation of this case. And it's basically the government giving rights to local organizations to use the forest in their benefit. And why this was important, because society in general benefit from leverage of knowledge, resources, skills, approaches from many other institutions. And that is why creating partnerships is very important, because we can obtain leverage and we can be stronger together and not isolated, separated. And so after 30 years, what we have seen is that in this area is the most conservated area in Central America. It has the almost zero deforestation, below 1% of fires. It gives food and sustain more than 15,000 families in the area. And it has a high presence of biodiversity and jaguars. And the cooperatives that operate in that area collectively generate a revenue of $6 million per year. So it is a great success example where we could drive economic growth and at the same time conserve forests and impact people and preserve animals and so on. So it is a great situation. And what has been the main challenge in this case, according to my friends who live there, the most challenging times have been the first 5 years, mainly because the local organizations were not achieving levels of sustainability for the same organizations, and that is why the financial resources that those organizations used during those 5 years were grants, and those grants helped those organizations strengthen, helped those organizations become much more sophisticated, And after 5 years, they became sustainable. They achieved break-even, and now, after many more years, they are sustainable organizations. And that's the one of the unique success factors of this case of having sustainable organization with local presence. And how we can scale it in other parts, I think that creating these partnerships is the first step. We alone, we cannot make it. We need to partner with governments. We need to partner with external institutions and local group of people. And I see many opportunities in Latin America. Actually, last week I was talking with the national directors in Latin America, and we were asking ourselves this question: how do we scale up this and replicate this case? And we are eager to, I'm happy to partner with any organization to try to answer this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruno. One quick additional question. So in the Guatemalan case, what have been the key barriers at the beginning when these communities were and these community forestry concessions were established? What was the barrier initially? Was it more institutional, or was it the behavior of the people on the ground, or the lack of trust? You mentioned trust and leadership at the beginning. Yeah. I also like very much this. I think when you start new things, you need to overcome risks. You need to also create a trusted environment. So were these barriers, or were there other types of barriers to establish these?
I think that the barriers are always the same. Again, I'm going back to my first question: it's people, and people. And this case started with, as Ileana said, rights. The government decided to give rights to those communities to exploit their natural resources. So it started with trust. How did a government make that strange decision at that moment? Because it had leadership, because there was a partnership trying to create advocacy and to show the government the benefits of this model. And there were people in the organizations and in the government and in the communities trying to take risks, risk takers, trying to do things in a new way, in a different way, and believe. This was new. Nobody saw what was going to happen. So people believe. So again, I will say that people and all those components that go with people.
Thank you very much, Bruno. We go back now to Ghana, and Ahmed, you also have been working with multi-stakeholder groups, and especially the multi-stakeholder landscape management boards that have been created in Ghana and that were led also by communities. So how many of these boards, can you give us a picture of how big are these? And then maybe the same type of question than what Bruno told us. Well, is this replicable? And also maybe is the current context favorable of the replication of such management boards?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. So just to say that Partnerships for Forest as a program has actually been designed in a way to find innovative solutions to landscape level challenges in terms of climate change and deforestation. But currently, in light of the COVID pandemic, if for nothing at all, the pandemic has actually showed us that how relevant our work is in the sector. It has also showed us how vulnerable the communities that we work with in the sector are, and has also actually garnered the need to actually accelerate efforts that we are doing in terms of working with communities. Now, in terms of some of the critical things that we do, for example, with Olam and with Rainforest Alliance and with other partners in Ghana, La Côte d'Ivoire, and Liberia, if you talk about, the landscape governance boards, for example, we have basically worked with these partners to set up and establish what we call the landscape, multi-stakeholder landscape management boards. And essentially, these boards are just to provide community landscape level structures that will then act as local authority for land management and sustainable land use. So we basically give communities, a lot of ownership in the process. We give them the opportunity to actually work with other, participants in the community to have more buy-in of the process and be able to lead on the processes of, ensuring that the work that we do in these landscapes are transformative and innovative. So it's about bringing in the communities, putting in place the needed structures, letting them have ownership and authority. Of course, not only them, but working very closely with the government entities, working also very closely with the private sector actors who are very key in providing, market access, and also working with, technical facilitators such as maybe Rainforest Alliance or nature conservation. So it's about really building these partnerships, using these technical experts to provide the support to these communities and, strengthen these landscape governance boards that we have set up to make them, very independent, to make them more self-sustaining and self-financing, such that they can carry out reforestation and restoration activities, on their own in these landscapes, without so much heavy reliance on, external donor support. So it's about creating the community landscape level structures, building them to be self-sustaining for, a common long-term vision and goal that we are talking about. Now, in terms of what Kennedy talked about also, what we do is to provide some level of incentives to these communities and to these entities that have been created in the landscape and the smallholder farmers, because incentives are very key to keep them going, and also tying these incentives to conservation outcomes or, performance-based results or payment. So this is also very critical in terms of what we do, because there's always the need to have right trade-offs that would actually near to the benefits of, our environment. Beyond that, we are also working with these communities to actually put together community forest, patrol and monitoring, and also working in terms of establishing robust and transparent deforestation, monitoring and alert systems in these communities. And for sure, these landscape governance entities are going to be very critical once their capacity has been built and they are strengthened to actually ensure forest protection in these landscapes, working together with the government entities and the units such as, from the Red Plus Secretariat. Just to say that with COVID, it has been really, really crucial to actually, harness even more the need for technology or tech-enabled solutions, in the work that we do. So for example, now we are repurposing some of our grants, working with these communities to actually put in place e-payment mechanisms or systems to have it a little bit more cashless, to also put in place e-learning platforms or e-learning trainings. For instance, if you talk about having a workshop of 100+ people, currently that's not possible. So what do? Do we have to wait and sit aloof? No, we actually have to, repurpose and look for innovative ways of working with these communities. And then beyond that, we also actually putting in place, community forest patrols and ensuring that together as a partnership, with private sector, with public sector, with the civil society and technical experts, we are able to harness the needed efforts, the needed resources, and the needed, knowledge to be able to bring about the change and transformation at scale. And if you follow what Kennedy has talked about, there's a lot of competition in the system. So for example, if you talk about the cocoa supply chain, what is absolutely critical is to have, a pre-competitive, landscape level collective action mechanism that allows for trust, allows partners to be able to work together based on trust. And then this is how we can actually see some transformative changes in these landscapes that we are working on.
Thank you very much. Maybe can I ask you in 1 minute, very shortly, you highlighted the importance of the silos in your first point. Can you just give us one example of an important silo that you had to break when you developed these communities?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a case of, for example, if you take me as a private company and then I am, going to initiate a project in, let's say, Biajaboso landscape, for example, it's just me and then the farmers. Over the past few years, those are some of the tendencies that we have seen. But now what these private companies are doing is recognizing and realizing that actually they can build synergies, they can build partnerships, which is why you see Olam working very strongly with Rainforest Alliance, coming with some kind of technical expertise. The same is happening in other private companies that we are working with, working with other technical expertise, and even the government agency. Now you have all of these entities sitting together on one table, trying to play specific unique roles. Previously, you wouldn't have had it like that. So if you look at the Ghana Red Plus process and, the strong support that Partnership for Forests is putting in that area, we are seeing some positive results. And that's how the sector is really transforming and moving in that direction.
Okay, thank you very much. We go back now to Guatemala with Ileana. So Ileana, you have also been working with communities, and you already mentioned the importance of the rights, but you also highlighted the importance of overcoming the barriers to investment. So could you tell us a bit more about what have been the triggers and how did the investments happen in these communities, and what were also the outcomes of these investments?
Thank you, Daniel. And building on some of the comments that were already raised by Bruno, and going back to my first response on why rights are so important, let me try to walk you really quick through 3 stages that we're seeing are really important when we're talking about how rights can trigger investment. And this is based on research that we have been doing in Guatemala, but also building of what's going on in other countries like Mexico and Nepal, where there has been an important investment happening there. So, we see 3 stages required to overcome these barriers. First, the first stage is like you need to have an investment in the right evolution process. What does this mean in practice? This means that governments, and oftentimes it's not only the governments, but also a lot of donor investment going on to guarantee the conditions. This is not only making sure that the regulations, that the law actually allow to guarantee this process of right evolution, but also how these regulations and right recognition processes actually catalyze the creation of governance arrangements on the ground. So this is the first. Now going into the second stage, what needs to happen, and I think Kennedy mentioned this in his reference to the process in Ghana, there needs to happen an investment in training and capacity building. And in the case of Guatemala, you will see this in terms of the outcomes. We have 12 community forest enterprises that were created from the community concession contract process. And this materializes in stronger social capital. So going into our third stage, what needs to happen is like once you have improved performance of the community forest enterprises, and I think Bruno referred to how the income generation and the dividends that these community forest enterprises are gaining, you also start to see new forms of investment in terms of arrangements between the community and the public sector and the private sector. And this allows to create new value chains and also to create new forms of transforming that actually allows these communities to engage with the market in a different but also unique way, as we are talking about community organizations after all. So what are some of the outcomes that we're seeing on the ground? And I think also going back to some of the outcomes that were also highlighted by Bruno. First, I would like to say that in terms of the outcomes, we see that there's at least 3 different levels of how these benefits are happening. This first at the household level, second at the community forest enterprise level that were created, and third, because here in the case of Petén, we're talking about a very unique case because these concessions are taking place in a protected area. You also see the benefits and the outcomes that are happening in the forest in particular. So going really quick, giving you some examples of the type of outcomes that we see in this at these 3 different levels. In terms of the household, we see that there is a lot of the forest income, it's becoming the livelihood pillar. And in the case of the community forest concessions in Petén, this means that families are deriving income from the forest ranging in average about 40% of their income. It's coming from the forest. And for some of these concessions, actually, it can go as high as 65% of their annual income. Then second, we also see how the households are reinvesting in housing, in improving their housing conditions, in improving the education conditions, in improving the health. So we also see an improvement in terms of social development. And in terms of the community forest enterprises, we see that there are 2 types of specific outcomes also going on. At first, in terms of employment and employment generation, not only in terms of the number of jobs that are being created, but also the type of jobs that are being created and the conditions of the employment that were given to the community people involved in these processes, and the dividends that are being distributed across the members. And finally, talking about how some of the outcomes that are happening at the protected, more in terms of the management of the forest. And I think this is very important. And probably you might all have heard about the forest fires that have been taking place this past months. There is like a lot of investment, not only from the government. We see an important partnership and alliance between the government, the non-governmental sector, and the communities working together to respond to forest fires. And in the case of the community forest concessions, this means that community forest concessions are investing at least 500,000 a year in forest fires. But all of these benefits and outcomes are relying on important governance arrangements, which in the case of Petén, it means renewing the contract, a contract that is 25 years. And from the 12 community concessions that are, 9 of them are being active, and we only have seen 1 contract being renewed. So it's very important that we have the commitment. We know the communities are committed to this process. We also need the commitment from the government and from the support of also all of the donors that are working on this, to get this process of renewal assured for the pending community concessions. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Lianelle. I think we have now probably the results of the Slido word cloud. Could we have it on screen? Okay, thank you very much. So we just have a look at it. You see the big word is power. Yeah, maybe political elements are very important, but also a lot of words about cooperation, shared views, joining efforts, and also some values around equitable equity, equal reliance, equality. So I think this word cloud shows also a number of the ingredients that are critical to create good alliances. We'll finish now with a very quick round with our panelists, and I will ask you, each of you, to come with 1 or 2 words, or what are the real critical elements for very successful alliances. So it's a bit the same as the first, but now with this, what would be the two things that you would point for the success of these alliances? Let's start with the order now with Kennedy. You are muted. Yes.
Yeah. So in going through the slide, I noticed some keywords which really resonates well with our Olam shared values. One key word that was used there was partnership. So as part of the Olam shared values, we have 6 shared values. One is partnership, and it talks about we strive to develop positive and long-term relationship with our partners. So to a large extent, we understand that we cannot go it alone. So we see normal language like, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go with others. So in Olam, we see, we cherish partners, and we think that together with partners, we can achieve higher goals. And at the landscape level, we think that partners such as Rainforest Alliance, such as Partnership for Forest, and others, we can take the process to a higher level. Thank you.
Thank you, Kennedy. Thank you very much. Bruno, can you be even quicker?
Yes, I will say 2 things. We need to believe that we can make a change. So belief is one part, and the other part is to take risks, because you do a partnership because you want to do something that you alone cannot do. So, and that involves trying to do things out of your comfort zone. So again, trust that we can make things happen, and risk taking.
Okay, thank you very much. Ahmed, what are your 3 words?
Yeah, I mean, my 3 words would basically be around mobilizing for collective action, for example, particularly in West and Central Africa, and actually building trust to allow for pre-competitive collaboration and engagement, because this is really the only, or let me say, the key way that we can actually scale, investment, scale models, and bring about a transformation. So it's really about mobilizing for collective action and, building trust among partners.
Thank you, Ahmed. Ileana.
I'll make it faster, because actually I was going to go, I'll support what Ahmed just said. I think it's collective action, and just really quick, I think it's not only about taking risk, but also risk assurance. How do we make sure that we are, overcoming these risks?
Yes, I think it's very important indeed. If you want to take risk, you need also to mitigate the risks that that are associated with your new action. So I think with these words, I would like to thank you all, and I give the floor again to Emma to conclude and finish this session.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you to all the speakers. I think one thing that really resonated through what many of you said was both this idea that the key to alliances is really people, and that we really have to build that trust and be willing to take those risks, but also mitigate them together. And then you can really see progress. And I think these have been excellent examples of where really building on those relationships and trust and partnership, we can see lasting change on a landscape level. So thank you all for sharing your experiences. Thank you, Daniel, for chairing and moderating and taking us through this session. For those of you who we are getting near the end of the session, so I think the questions that we've received throughout, we will respond through the GLF app, and we'll also share those with the speakers to follow up. So I would like to take this moment to thank the participants and also the audience for this session. We will be continuing the Rainforest Alliance session in about 20 minutes at 4:15. And so for now, thank you all, and we will resume at 4:15 to look at our final session, looking at landscape and monitoring and evaluation.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you all.